Welcome everyone to the Sunday night market recap. I'm your host Bobby Bones, and I hope that everyone is having a great weekend so far. I want to get into and give my perspective over the past week and what's coming for the near future.
In a world of deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act.
Yeah. So, tonight's episode, I want to be going over the markets and other important news. It's June 1st, 2025. Tonight, market recap. Promises made, math ignored. Again, House Representative Speaker Johnson lied about the big, beautiful bill on Meet the Press. We're going to get into that. Also, what does it mean to be liberal, right? Because it seems like there's a lot of people who don't understand what the term even means. Also, why is college so expensive? I want to get into some of that. Also, why is government the problem and not foreigners? I'm going to explain that one later on tonight as well. All that and a whole lot more. So let's start off with the markets and let's get into it. Gold was flat on the week. It started the week at 33.58 and we settled at 33.13. So we fell about $40. And looking at futures, they look like they're going to go higher tomorrow, Monday. So I look forward to that. Silver was also flat on the week, closing at around $33.07 per ounce. Silver looks like it's up as well on the futures, but you could still buy 100 ounces of silver for 1 ounce of gold. So my advice to anybody watching this video is, hey, look, if you can't afford gold at $3,300, pick up silver at $33 an ounce. It's a great buy. Plus, I believe, and a lot of market insiders believe, that silver is going to have a much stronger, more productive run up than gold. We believe gold's going to go up just as silver's percentages are going to go up even more. So why not take the discount? Also, another great way to get into gold is to buy the mining companies, the gold mining and juniors. So let's start out with the GDX. Continue to move higher, landing at about $50.65 per share, up 1.4% on the week. Let's take a look at the GDXJ. Also continued going up this week, landing at 65.32, up almost 2% on the week. Looking at the dollar was bumping around all week, settled at 99.44, up 0.5% on the week. But if you count it from Liberation Day, it's down about 10% still. Futures are pointing down for the dollar. Also, the 10-year and 30-year treasuries were flat on the week. Let's take a look at them. The 10-year treasury settled at 4.38%, and the 30-year treasury settled a little bit lower, dropping below 5%, settling at 449.29. Futures for them actually are pointing up, and that's not good if, for taking out loans, mortgages, stuff like that. So we have to take a look at the treasuries going into tomorrow. So tonight, Sunday night, they're pointing up. The stock market was flat on the week. The Dow gained less than 1% on the week, landing at 42,278. Let's take a look at the S&P. The S&P landed at $59.13, with futures for both pointing down again. I'm sorry, $59.13. So there are your numbers for the week. I hope that you enjoyed that. And please remember to subscribe to this channel. And if you catch us on my other social media sites, youtube.com/abrewmedia. Also, remember to like, share, follow. Visit me on my X account as well, x.com/brewmedia, all one word. Please share my content. The more I get my content out, the more I could do more stories and get to touch more people, give people more of a free market perspective, a more libertarian perspective. Also, I am not funded by anyone, and everything that I do is self-funded. I am truly independent media. So look, if you're gonna not support me, at least support other independent media. But I do appreciate you for coming, checking me out. Please hit that little subscribe button and, give a brother a little bit of help here, because I could use it. And my goal is to get out there and grow this business, having other people join the team. I see myself going to rallies and having different debates and stuff. So that's what I would like to do, and I can't do that without your help. Please hit the subscribe button, like, share, comment. So my next story has to do with Speaker Johnson lying about the big, beautiful bill on Meet the Press over the weekend. He said, and I quote, that the bill doesn't add money to the national debt, that it will reduce the debt, and represents the largest step forward that Congress has ever taken to change in the fiscal trajectory of the U.S. He's correct on one thing. It is a large step moving forward. It's a budget buster. It's a dollar buster. It's a treasury buster, right? It's a sell America trade buster, right? This budget is going to add at minimal $4 trillion. It could add $10 trillion. And why I go that high, it's going to add probably closer to 7, is because, they don't figure in wars, they don't figure in hurricanes and natural disasters and terrorism attacks and all sorts of things that can happen over the next decade. Because there's one thing we know about the CBO in Congress, is that they never get it right. That whatever they project, it's always a hell of a lot more than what they project. So if they say it's 2 trillion, you could double that to 4. If they say it's 4 trillion, you could probably double that to 8. And that's about right, because when Trump passed his bill in 2017, which gave us all these tax cuts and everything, and he expanded government, making Space Force and grew spending, they said, oh, it'll pay for itself. And here we are, almost $14 trillion more in debt 10 years later, right? And their worst estimates had it around $2-3 trillion. So if we go by those estimates, and they're saying it's $4 trillion, then probably it's going to be around $12 trillion if we keep on pace with getting it that percentage-wise wrong. So, what we need to do from a libertarian perspective is cut government, get government out of our life. The thing that makes us unproductive is the fact that we have so much government in our life. I was talking to somebody earlier on one of my social media pages, and, was talking about farming. And I made the comment, and I said, look, do you realize that our federal government prevents farmers from farming? That their stated goal is to raise prices? And that they have farmers destroy food? Right? So, in a free market, that would never happen. So then he wrote back and goes, yeah, because, they don't want farmers flooding the market with a bunch of food and dropping prices. I says, oh my God, that would be terrible, right? To drop prices, right? And to have an abundance of food. See, it's government that creates scarcity. It's government that raises prices, right? What we need to do is get the government out of farming. The farmers aren't stupid, right? They're going to adjust to whatever the market is. They know better than the politicians in D.C. We should not be paying farmers, right, to destroy crops. So I wanted to get into that, and I wanted to get in to, basically what does it mean to be liberal, which is my next story. And, it's funny because, a lot of people say, oh, if you're a Republican, you hate liberals. You're like, oh, liberals are evil, this, that, the other. And, what they don't understand is that being liberal really means believing in the Constitution, right? What it means is believing in individual and economic freedom, right? Now, how did the Democrats get tagged with the term liberal, right? What happened was when FDR became president and he was coming out with the New Deal, he coined it as being liberal. Like, oh, look, I'm doing all this government and all this government is very liberal. When actually it wasn't liberal, it was actually socialist. That the true liberals were the founders, right? The people who believed in, freedom of the press and freedom of speech and the right to protect yourself, right? And the right to pursue your happiness and to be free from government. That's what it means to be liberal. And today, both parties tend to get that wrong. They associate liberal with big government, when actually being liberal is taking care of yourself, right? I talk about all the time how, when the founders created government, right? They created government to protect our rights, right? Today, Americans associate being liberal with stealing from your neighbor and then redistributing the wealth to other groups of people, right? That's not being liberal, right? Home of the free has become home of the freeloader. That's not liberal. Liberal is leaving your neighbor alone, right? Not having to ask government for every little thing, right? Not, being sucking on the government's teat, right? That's being liberal, right? Living independence. You can accept other people's behavior as long as they're not breaking the law, right? Or infringing on other people's rights, okay? That's what being liberal is. And so I wanted to kind of square that up and, take a few moments and talk about what being a true class, like I consider myself a classic liberal, closer to the founders, right? Because I'm a libertarian, I'm an independent, right? I want government so small I can't even see it. And a lot of the biggest problems that we have today is government, right? Why can't we compete with China? Why? Because of government. So I'm going to get into that in a little bit. But I wanted to also get into why college is so expensive, which is going to bring me to my next story. So I've talked about in the past why college is so expensive. And I tell the story about how my grandmother used to work a part-time job. And she was able to go to school and she got a master's degree, right? And when she left college, okay, she didn't owe any money, right? She paid as she went, okay? And what happened was, back in the 60s, the politicians, in order to curry favor with the voters and to get the younger vote, they said, hey, look, instead of working that part-time job flipping burgers or, working at the drive-in, what we'll do is we'll back the loans. And then you could just have off all summer. And then, when you get a good job, you come back and you can pay the loan and it'll be very cheap and it's a win-win for everybody, right? You get off for the summer, you get to get the degree, and then you get to get a good education. And so what happened? When the colleges figured this out, they started raising prices because they understood, hey, as long as the government, the taxpayers, the bag holder, who gives a damn about the price? And so what happened was prices started to go up. And instead of government pulling back on all of that subsidy, the government added more and made it more easier for young people who had no skill, no jobs, no credit to take on all this debt, right? It makes no sense to take on a bunch of debt. You have no job, you have no skill, right? You're just starting out in life, right? It makes no sense to give that person $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 in loans, sometimes even over $100,000, right? So that's what happened. Now, if you look before government started subsidizing loans, what happened was prices stayed flat for like 70 years prior to government subsidizing these loans and backing these loans. And they did the same thing with housing. The reason why housing is so expensive is because the federal government backs all these loans. If the government wasn't there to back all these high-risk loans, then what would happen is demand would go down, prices would come down, back down to reality, and then what would happen is the market would correct itself. Then younger people would be able to afford a home. When I grew up, there were 25-year-olds who were able to buy a house. Now, you got to be 35, 40 years old before you buy your first house because young people cannot afford a house. And if they can't afford a house, then they're not going to, get married and raise a family, right? Because they're too busy trying to build up their wealth. It's so hard because of what government did that they destroyed a lot of opportunity. So it's government that raises prices. Like I said, it's government that creates scarcity. If government wasn't involved, things like college and housing would be a lot cheaper. And so I want to share with everybody a little quick video.
Currently licensed.
Check this out.
That doesn't need to be backed with force.
So you're elected. Let's pretend. The economy. First thing, what would you do?
Well, the first thing I would do is signify to Congress that if they submit to me a budget that isn't balanced, it'll be a vetoed budget. I'll be challenging Congress to get to a neutral budget, so we're not adding.
That was
to the
Chase
debt
Oliver.
Right, they'll say,
you could have
sure,
voted for him.
We'll raise taxes.
It is time for a wealth tax.
Yeah, you're going to have to pay more in taxes. We're pushing for fair tax.
And let me tell you something. Republicans are going to tax you more as well, even though that they're going to cut the nominal price. The overall inflation tax and cost of living tax is going to go up as government spends. See, we have to understand something. Spending is a tax, right? And so why us libertarians support free and open trade? Our trade deficit is not caused by foreigners, but rather by DC and local governments. It's not foreigners and foreign governments why we are so unproductive, but rather big centralized policies of DC, state, local governments that crushes our competitive advantage and destroys our ability to compete. Just like I was explaining earlier, how government gets involved, how they raise prices in college, how they raise prices in housing, how they destroy farms and actually advocate to destroy food and raise prices, right? This is why you can't compete. It's protectionist policies like tariffs, taxes, regulations, permits that just gum up the system. And it's funny because the people I argue with most tend to be MAGA and Republicans. It's like they support all this big government stuff, and it's like, don't you even understand what it means to be a conservative, right? To conserve, right? To get government off your back, to live your life as you choose, as long as you're not infringing on the rights of others. It's nobody's business, right? How much crops I want to produce, or, how many homes I want to build, or what deal I want to make with somebody, right? If I want to make a deal with Bobby, Jimmy, and Vinny, and Stacy, why should the government be in the middle of that? Leave us alone. Get out of our life, right? So, from a libertarian perspective, having more freedom is always good. What isn't good is having a central bank that artificially creates inflation by keeping interest rates too low that discourages individuals from saving and creates massive individual and corporate debt that inflates financial bubbles that allows our government to run these massive deficits that is sucking the capital out of our economy and crowding it out, which leaves us no choice but to import more. It's the government that is doing this to us, and the politicians have been very successful at blaming everyone else. Trump is trying to make Americans sound like we are the victims of foreigners when actually we are the victims of government and the central bank. until we clear out and reverse all the artificial barriers to entry the government has created, we need to go back to sound money and capitalism policies, right? That incentivize savings versus debt. We can expect to continue down the same path that we've been for over the past 50 years. Just a reminder to everybody, if you like this kind of content, please hit the little subscribe button. It doesn't cost anything, and it helps me to reach more people and allows me to create more content, get out there. And my goal, like I said, is to grow this channel, get people working with me, get out there and to put out greater content. So youtube.com/broommedia. Also, remember to please like, share, and comment. And I also want to give a closing statement. So tonight's going to be a little bit quicker of a show. Look, learning to overcome our fears and empower yourself is essential for success. Overcoming those constant negative thoughts going on inside your head is essential to stand up to the negative people and look past them. Working on yourself, working on listening to that inner dialogue is so important. Everyone is self-made, yet only the wealthy will admit it. When you have something that you want to do and you don't develop the courage to do it, then you will automatically lose. You must keep pushing and mature your greatness. It is easy to have low morale today, but if you decide that today is your day for a better life, then put everything you have into what you're working on and just keep pushing forward. Look, I'm not throwing a bunch of money at this business called Broom Media. I'm starting literally from the bottom. I don't have anybody funding me, all right? I'm going to keep pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing until I make it, right? This is a make it or break it type of business. Every business I've ever had that went to success, I've started with nothing. And so that's what I'm doing here as well. So like when you see like Tucker Carlson and Dave Smith and all these guys, I mean, they literally put millions of dollars into their business, right? And, they've been at it for a very long time. So look, I'm starting from the ground up. I appreciate you for taking the time, giving me encouragement, subscribing and, following me. Look, if I believe in you, and I really wish everyone great prosperity and happiness. Please don't forget to go to my X account at x.com/broommedia. And, and I will upload this by Monday evening. And that's what I'm planning on doing. But my goal is to reach more people and to put out more content. So I appreciate you. Also, before I leave, I wanted to make it to the Bitcoin convention. I didn't make it. But some of the asinine things that I've seen that they've set out, regarding Bitcoin, Michael Saylor is telling people, basically sell your home, sell all your assets, just put it all into Bitcoin. He's telling if you own a dentistry, sell your dentistry, just stick it in Bitcoin. I mean, that's kind of ridiculous. Look, if you want to gamble on Bitcoin, that's cool. But just understand that there's a difference between price and value, and that you need to be sane, right, when investing, and to make prudent decisions, okay? So just be careful of stuff like that. I highly do not recommend, giving up your dentist practice or selling your home or taking on massive debt like Michael Saylor has for MicroStrategy just to become a Bitcoin stock or a Bitcoin holder. But I believe in individual freedom and individual economic choice. And so if your choice is to gamble on Bitcoin, that's cool. Just let's be honest about what Bitcoin is. I'll get into Bitcoin on later episodes. As you can tell, I'm more of a gold bug. I'm more of a sound money bug. Because I believe gold has real value. But look, we'll get into that at another time. So listen, I appreciate everyone and hope everyone has a great evening and a great week. God bless you. God bless your family. And I hope to see you on the next one. Take care.